Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
Thanks for that, Rasanda. Right, let's get to In the Spotlight, which we do every afternoon, of course. And I certainly am happy to rely on your suggestions in terms of who else we should be putting on the spotlight. So, Penny Heyns, I should tell you, there's lots of people said when we chatted to Chad Leclos and Cameron van der Berg a couple of months ago, say, okay, you're chatting to these guys now, but where's Penny Heyns? So, maybe blame it on people who've insisted that you need to be here. So that's why you're here.
Okay, well, I'm glad. Thanks.
Indeed. So thanks for allowing us to put you in the spotlight. Now, having said all of that, where are you now? Besides the fact that you live in Pretoria, what are you doing with yourself?
Well, since I retired, which it's scary to think that's about 11 years ago now.
11 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Got a few grey hairs coming through now. But I've sort of established myself as a corporate speaker. I don't really like the word motivational speaker because my personal philosophy is that to be successful in life, ultimately that inspiration has to come from within. So you have to be self-motivated. So there's a lot of, the term motivational speaker sort of in my mind conjures up this idea of someone that's on stage doing a rah-rah thing.
Like a ringmaster.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice for a short time, but it doesn't last. So ultimately, my hope is that in sharing some of my journey, and interestingly enough, it's not really those winning moments, but rather the times when you have to struggle through challenges, the perceived failures, whatever it may be. It's in those moments that you really got to dig deep and learn from those experiences. And so hopefully in sharing that with others and the journey and the hope in that no matter how deep the hole is or the circumstance you find yourself in at any given moment, you never know what tomorrow might hold if you just keep pushing forward and continuing. And so I rather see it as inspiration, hopefully.
Okay, so you say what? Penny Heyns, corporate speaker now. But you do use the word Olympic champion. I mean, do you put the title Olympic champion next to your name? You should.
I don't know. It's on my website, I suppose, you can't get away from it. And obviously I feel honored as I look back on my career and especially now, in hindsight, having watched the Olympic Games also, you're just kind of reminded of what a privilege it was to compete at that level and to have achieved what I did. I feel very humbled by that. And especially watching Chad and Cameron now, it brought back a lot of memories and it certainly was a great time. Obviously, I think for everyone to be young was a great time.
Of course, yeah.
And
just looking at Chad and Cameron, I mean, you were the first South African to win, the first new South African, let's call it that, to win a gold medal. Is that correct?
The first one in 44 years, yeah.
So, I mean, the one was part of an old South Africa, a different debate. But since this country was united, you're the first one, right? What advice would you give Chad and Cameron now? I'm just thinking about us now, and it's quite ironic. When they came here, and they came on separate days, we had the whole world here. So here comes Penny Heyns, and there's nobody around you. I mean,
it was a secret.
Things change, right? So then it's like a big rah-rah about it.
Yes.
What advice would you give them? Like it's like about a month and a half or two down the line now.
Well, I think, first of all, that they're both very fortunate in the sense that, hopefully at least, in the last 16 years, South Africa as a whole, and specifically the coaches and the sporting federations, have learnt a little bit in terms of how to better manage us as athletes. I think back in the day when I achieved what I did, it was so new to all of us. So I was just fortunate that I had the right people around me at the right time. But it's a fine balance, enjoying the success that you've just achieved, and for them to obviously leverage the opportunities that come their way now. It's going to be tricky to make the most of that and at the same time continue competing at the same level.
Because you do agree, you do need to leverage the opportunities, don't you?
Yes, you do. Especially, I mean, swimming's not one of those sports where you make a lot of money, especially not out of your performances directly. So if they are going to leverage it, it's going to be by way of sponsors or whatever. And that requires commitment in terms of time and energy. But, of course, everything you give to the one means taking away from your swimming. So if we go back and we look in 2004 as an example, and you take Ryk and Roland Skuman, and with all due respect to both athletes, they're brilliant athletes, very nice guys, but it's a tangible example. Ryk was at the end of his career. He could afford to come back to South Africa, base himself over here. He was available to the sponsors, and therefore he's leveraged it very well, and everybody knows who Ryk Neethling is. And to the general public, they think he's the biggest swimmer.
Yes.
And like I say, with all due respect to Ryk, Roland, however, was the one who came away with 3 Olympic medals, 2 individual.
So actually did better.
Ultimately, he's of the 2, he's the better swimmer, and everybody would agree to that. But he based himself in the States to continue swimming, continue training, wasn't available at home to leverage those opportunities. And so there's always a price to pay. And like I say...
So who made the right decision between those two?
I think they both did. I think for Ryk, the timing was right to come home. I think for Roland, he still had his eye on the goal in terms of swimming and performing in the swimming pool. And in order to do that for him, it was the right move to stay in the States. Both Cameron and Chad, everybody likes to tout them as homegrown. Chad definitely is. Cameron has had a lot of experience abroad and trained with foreign coaches. So I have a question about homegrown, but anyway.
Indeed. Well, Penny Heyns is certainly with us. So if you want to join the conversation, you can call in as I put her in the spotlight. In fact, you can put her on the spot, in the spotlight. 0891104207, 0891104207. If you wish to SMS 34701, you can also tweet me to Ashraf Garda1 and comment via my Facebook page. We'll talk lots more. I'm going to ask Penny, and what's the one thing about her we don't know that you'd like to share with us? But you don't have to answer it, and I'll give you like 30 seconds to think about it. We'll do it right after this.
Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
Right, Penny Heyns with me. So I asked you earlier on, what's the one thing about you we don't know? There's lots of things we know, we think we know, but there are things that you know we don't know, but it's just like, why don't these people know this about me? So what is it about you?
Usually I have an answer for every question, but that I've been sitting here for the last few minutes thinking, what can I say? And I hit a blank. I think people probably know this, but I'm a bit of an introvert, so I'm actually quite shy. But at the same time, I suppose somehow when you step into the role of having to do the public appearances or whatever, it's sort of automatic. It takes over. But I think what people don't know is how did the swimming start, or how did the breaststroke start, or why breaststroke specifically.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, as a young kid, I was the oldest, the only girl of 3 children. I have 2 younger brothers, and my mom fancied me as her little ballerina.
Okay.
And so I had to do tap, modern, and ballet. And I always joke and say I walk like a duck, a little bit of ballet breaststroke feet. And so eventually I swam breaststroke, or got into club swimming, because I had to really fight to convince my mother I was a better swimmer than I was a dancer.
Okay. So is that how you got into it? Because Rake Muirtling got into swimming because you almost drowned, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, apparently so. But no, in my case, I grew up in Manzimtoti, so along the coast you have to learn to swim. Yeah. It's a life skill, and from I think probably the age of 2 or 3. Possibly what they don't know is I fancied Man from Atlantis. There was that program back in those days.
Patrick Duffy, I think.
Yeah.
But he's back on TV now. He's back still.
Yeah, but he doesn't look like he used to. And
Yeah.
I fancied that, and I think that caused me to take to the water and do that underwater.
When did you
dolphin
realize
stuff.
you were good? Because I'm talking firstly as kids, not as a potential champion. Even amongst your own family, all of us can think about it. If I look at my kids, I know who's the better swimmer of the 4 or 5 of us, right? When did you realize, even at a family level, that, hold it, I'm actually better than these people?
Well, I think being the oldest, you tend to dominate anyway. I have 2 younger brothers, as I said, but they're very talented as swimmers. But our neighbour, his son was 2 years older than us. So in Decembers, when they'd come down and visit his dad, we'd always dice in the pool and have races and stuff. And it was quite easy for me to beat all the boys in the neighbourhood. So I guess that's
so you knew that
gave it
anyway.
away.
Right. Now the next question is, when then did you know that you were good enough to make this into a career? There must have been that moment.
For me, it never was a case of looking toward the future and imagining the Olympics and having some big dream like you would hear Rake and others. I think Chad and Cameron both had Olympic aspirations at some point. For me, it was really just trying to be the absolute best I can on the day with the talent I was given. I felt I needed to go and train and develop my swimming, because at some point in time when I die, I'm going to stand before my maker and have to answer for what I did with my talent. And that was sort of the driving force. So it really was just a process of one step at a time, one race at a time. And as I got better, I obviously then represented South Africa internationally, not very successfully, in Barcelona. And then later, had an opportunity to go to Canada and to the US and swim on a scholarship there. And basically once I was there, I started realizing, with the support of the coaches and everything, that potentially I could be one of the top swimmers in the world. But even at that point, I still didn't think I'd be Olympic gold medalist.
So it didn't happen when you got the scholarship? Because, you see, some may say, and I read about this every day, where you hear a youngster's going for a soccer trial to Real Madrid from South Africa, or to Barcelona or Man United, and almost the impression given is the trial or the 2-week camp suggests the players got it made. Did you not think then even the fact that you got a scholarship suggests that you already had some serious talent?
Well, by then I'd already won the senior nationals and broken the SA record and got my Springbok colours. So in terms of being the best in South Africa, at that point I knew that, but still didn't really focus my sights on being the best internationally. And really, there were at that stage in terms of South African swimming, not a lot of female swimmers went over to the United States on scholarship. So I really didn't think about what it means as much as I rather did. This is an opportunity and I better take it, otherwise someday I might wonder what if.
Okay, so your motivation was very clear. You have to answer to God, right?
Exactly.
Otherwise you'd be in serious trouble. Well, Penny Heyns made a point often, and I know this when she won races, about, expressing her gratitude to God. I will take a couple of calls. So if you want to say hi to Penny Heyns as I put her in the spotlight, that's fine. 0891 104207, 0891 104207, 3471 if you want to SMS me, and I'll read those in a second. Let me just say, well, Khonsi wants to compliment me about interviewing skills. Okay, that's another story completely. Appreciate that, Khonsi. That's not about Penny Heyns, right? Let's talk about that. That you're very godly, and you make that point. And I just say so because it's interesting. You, at the same time that you emerge, we had guys like John T. Rhodes in cricket, and now you got Hashim Amla, and many people say that the strength that he clearly has is the mental strength.
Yes.
And I remember many people talking about that to you, because you said you're rather introverted. Hashim's pretty shy and pretty quiet,
yes,
but he certainly performs where he needs to. I mean, can you see the similarities in how he's driven you?
I think, like I said earlier on, I believe whatever we do, and I think this is probably true for the Jonties and Hashim Amla and every other, the other athletes who tend to attribute their success to the Lord. I would think that you need to be driven from within. There's got to be a deeper motivation. And for me, I'm glad you said godly as opposed to religious. I always kind of shun that word.
Is there a difference there for you?
For me personally, I believe so. I think there's a lot of people who refer to religion, but religion is, I just prefer to talk about being spiritual as opposed to religion, because I believe it's, to me anyway, it's a relationship with the Lord as opposed to a structured. Okay,
so you don't need to sort of be
rigid,
but you have a belief.
I just felt that, it's a real living relationship, and I feel a responsibility with my talent to use it. It's got to translate from some form of success to significance ultimately, meaning it's got to have some eternal significance. Otherwise, what's the point anyway? I kind of look at everything in life that way.
Some may say it's got, your records are eternal anyway. I don't mean in a spiritual sense that we'll never forget it. Let's talk about that. I mean,
maybe in a sense, but let's be honest. I mean, I might have had a lot of records while I swam, and if you talk about world records, they've all been broken since. Obviously, world swimming as a whole has just gone to a different level for many reasons, but it's natural progression in terms of sport to always get faster. And the girls currently worldwide are swimming amazing times. I'm kind of happy I'm not swimming anymore, but. Obviously, there are those firsts that can never be taken away. The first since return for South Africa in 44 years, the first double gold ever, and currently still in the breaststroke events. In terms
Nobody's
of the Olympics.
Ever done that. So winning that's
the 100 and the 200 at the Olympics, yes. But, fortunately, I didn't know that at the time. Okay. I think if I'd known the statistics, I probably might have been psyched out and out-touched in the 200. But so it was very fortunate that I didn't know that at the time. And there's pretty much all the statistics. At the time when I was doing it, I didn't know. Like, no one else has broken the world record in the 50, 100 and 200.
Why wouldn't anybody tell you, and why wouldn't you yourself know that?
I didn't.
Because someone said,
I didn't do research.
But
I didn't pay attention to the past. I didn't even know who some of the world record holders were before me, or the former Olympic gold medalists. I just didn't pay attention to that. I just focused on my swimming.
Is that advice you'd give other people too now?
Yeah, in a way I would. I would think, if you're called to do a specific thing in life, whatever it may be, call it destiny or whatever, the best way to get there and to do that is to focus on doing that which you have control over to the best of your ability. One step at a time, one stroke at a time, if it's swimming, whatever it may be, one day at a time. And so if you focus on that, then you move forward in the direction that you're called. But if you're so busy watching other people's statistics, trying to live up to, let's say, the Joneses, or measure up to someone else's expectations, in other words, not swimming or running your own race, then it's very difficult. You're going to take some detours along the way, and then you're going to take longer to get to your final destination.
Indeed. Okay, Penny Heyns with me in the spotlight. Lots of people liking the fact that we're chatting, and that's great. You during the Olympics, you were at home, and then you were at the Olympics as well.
Yeah,
the last one.
For the first week of the London Olympics with the swimming, I was back in South Africa. I did some stuff with Supersport, and then during the second week, I was fortunate enough to accompany Telkom as their celebrity host for some of their corporate guests. So we went to the track and field events. I got to see Usain Bolt run the 200, and obviously Oscar run the relay, and Custer and all of our South African athletes.
What's it like not being involved?
It was
being a spectator.
It was the first time I've been back to the Olympic Games since I retired from Sydney Olympics in 2000. So in that sense, it was great being back. And I must say, I really, really enjoyed my time with Telkom and their guests. I feel that, to me, it gave me a lot of insight into sport being a spectator this time around. Because I think, in the past, I've always been so caught up in my own responsibilities and what I have to do on the day that I really didn't make the most of it and enjoy what the Olympics is all about. And so this gave me a great opportunity to appreciate the enormity of the event.
Let's talk about the best day of your life, your career-wise, of course, for Penny Heyns.
Also not an easy one to pick. Reason being that obviously everyone would expect it should be the first gold medal. And in a sense it was. I mean, no one can take that away, that the sense of relief at first touching that war. But then the 200 was such a surprise in a sense. So that was also a highlight, especially when I found out the statistics. But for me personally, looking back on my career, I think the second to last year of my career in 1999, I had a winning streak of breaking 11 world records in a row.
Wow.
And that was so unexpected. The season prior to that, I had struggled basically since Atlanta for 2.5 years to really get back to form, to really have a desire to swim. At times I hated it so much I'd actually physically go to the pool and physically throw up. And so in that moment, as I mentioned earlier on, sometimes you're in such a deep hole you can't see the promise of tomorrow or a better future. And in those moments I never foresaw that I would ever get back to close to my best form, much less world records. And then within 1.5 years of making the right decisions, really focusing and applying myself in the pool, having the right attitude, I think above all, I eventually got to that point where I was in the best shape of my life and breaking world records. And it's not really the records that mean the most to me, but rather the experience of seeing that it's possible to get out of a hole and go beyond what you could ever think. So
I can imagine a person listening to you and I talk now and saying, like, an Olympic champion in a hole? That does not make any sense. How can you be in a hole? And you're going to tell me what?
You know what? It's funny, and I don't know if Cameron and Chad are ever going to experience this, but having spoken to some other past Olympic gold medalists, I know that they've felt similarly. In the 1.5 years after Atlanta and the successes there, I reached a point where I no longer knew why I should continue swimming. I no longer knew who I was in a sense as a person, because suddenly I was labeled by everybody as the gold medalist or whatever it might be. And you find a place where you're so overwhelmed with the sense of expectation. Everybody expects you to repeat it and to be as good as you were yesterday. And I found myself in a place where I would have never done it, but I understood why someone would feel so hopeless that they want to end their lives.
So this would be between...
This was around 97,
so between
end
Atlanta
of 97.
And then obviously before.
Yeah.
So about 1.5 years after Atlanta.
Yes. And I did some research, and apparently they've done studies, and they found of the medalists, Olympic medalists, gold, silver, and bronze, the gold medalists have the highest suicidal tendency.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and I
didn't know that.
I think it's because these athletes really aspire to achieve, and I think all athletes, they have this dream, and it's almost like we have this little nagging voice inside us, and if we don't silence it with achievement, other people, perhaps it's position in business, perhaps it's a certain bank account, certain wealth, I don't know. Some people it might be drugs, alcohol, whatever, but we all tend to seek happiness externally. And as an athlete, despite the fact that I should have known better, I guess I had done that. And so having reached gold, at first you feel amazing and everybody knows who you are and you're happy, and it's this high that you're on for a couple of months. And then suddenly you get back to reality. In my case, I went back to America. No one knew who I was. My coach went to Canada. I stayed in America. So I suddenly just felt this emptiness and realized that you think this gold medal is going to change your life, but it doesn't. I mean, it does change your life in some ways, some positive, but a lot of it also negative. And you've got to learn to sort of reinvent yourself, establish your goals, identify where you're going, and find that motivation to get up again and get past this fear of disappointing someone next time round.
I mean, did you find that when you won the gold medals, and of course we all celebrated, and I can remember absolutely being, well, overwhelmed just listening to the fact that you won one and then two, and then Josiah Tegwani, I think, finally winning on the last day of the Atlanta Olympic Games, right? But that ultimately, for South Africa to celebrate in your achievements, we celebrate only because of what you do for us, meaning it's not even like Penny Heyns is winning, it's like I'm winning.
Yeah.
And that sense of responsibility. And isn't that part of the problem? That we like you because you win. If you don't win,
Well, it's
we're not gonna go
true.
to the
Without
airport.
mentioning any names, let's
Yeah.
just look at a couple of Springbok players, rugby players. A season or two ago, a few of them were the biggest names in the sport in the world, and everybody idolized them. And now they have a couple of seasons where they're not playing so well, and everybody wants to crucify them. And that's just the nature of it. So right now, Cameron and Chad are on top, and that's great. And I hope for them that they continue and that they go to the next Olympics and repeat as medalists, because I think that's the hardest thing to do. We saw evidence of that even in Michael Phelps and others this time around. But certainly, people are fickle, and I think that's the truth. We appreciate the support, but at the end of the day, the athlete needs to get back to basics and realize that ultimately you're the one going to bed at night, you're the one that has to live and dream and deal with your success and also your losses. And at the end of the day, we have to try and get beyond worrying about what everyone else is thinking and saying.
Sure. So now, 11 years since retirement, I mean, are you rich money-wise? And I have to specify money because some people answer rich in a different way.
I keep saying I'm rich in spirit. Swimming, as I said, is not a sport where you can earn and sit back and retire forever. So while I was swimming and the sponsorships I had up until the day I retired, because pretty much once I retired, the sponsorships were finished as well. It's a little different now. The guys are leveraging it beyond their swimming careers. But in my day, it wasn't that. And so I was fortunate that the sponsors I had at the time made it possible for me to be in Canada and to continue swimming after my scholarship in the States was up, and to be independent from my mom and dad and financially free to go and swim wherever I needed to. But certainly not in the sense that I can retire and not work. So,
okay, so you're still doing some hard work. By the way, Neville Smith saying, ask Penny what she thinks of being known as the greatest female breaststroker of all time. South Africa is privileged to have her. You see, it's all about success.
Well, I mean, like I say, as I look back on my career, I feel humbled by what I achieved. To make statements like that, I think it might be true for the 20th century, right? But since I retired, there have been some other phenomenal breaststroke swimmers. So it's really hard to compare. Every generation, there's changes to the technique, to the environment, the support, the whatever it might be, the science of the sport. So we can't compare generation from generation, but certainly I feel blessed by my career. Thanks.
Indeed. There's a couple of Facebook comments as well, but I'll tell you what, I'll read them in just a second. Let me just remind you, we're chatting to Penny Heyns. Neville's tweet, the greatest breaststroker of them all time. That's how he's described, I think, two golds at Atlanta and then one at the Sydney Olympic Games as well. Just correct me if I'm wrong.
A bronze in Sydney.
A bronze only,
bronze
right?
in Sydney,
yes,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
and nothing in the 200, right? Okay, 0891 104 207. I'll read those others, but if you want to call, besides issues, and I sometimes do this challenge and sometimes people respond to it. Anybody knows Penny Heyns personally, wants to say hi, well, you certainly can do so. Otherwise, I'll pick out the comments from Innocent and Lala. We'll do that in a moment. Let's get the news headlines now. It's 3:30.
Thanks, Ashraf. Good afternoon. Labour Minister Mildred Oliphant has intervened at wage talks between striking truck drivers and employers in Johannesburg, calling on parties to try and resolve the dispute. Talks to end the strike are continuing in the Road Freight Bargaining Council in Braamfontein. Goldfields has distributed a letter to striking miners at its KDC West mine on the Far West Rand to arrange free transport to take them back to their homes. This after the company evicted workers from hostels yesterday. And the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into the shootings at Lonmin's Platinum Mine at Marikana in Northwest has been postponed. Lawyers representing the different parties have unanimously decided to postpone the matter to October 22nd. These are the news headlines here on SAFM with me, Asanda Matsaunyane. Greg Hose has details just after 4. Back to you, Ashraf.
Afternoon Talk on SAFM.
All right, and at 4 o'clock, of course, it's PM live time, so we'll get to that at 4 to 6 PM every afternoon. Penny Heyns with me. Some of the comments, Innocent saying, so good day, Ashraf. Could you also say hi to Penny? I need to know from her what is it that she's currently doing, because it's been a long time since we heard about after winning that gold medal. And maybe you can answer all these in... Okay, maybe answer that one. You've sort of answered that to a degree, but maybe just more specifically, what are you doing? Does the corporate speaking, not the motivational speaking, take up all your time?
It does take up a lot of time, and I really enjoy and feel privileged to be able to do that. In addition to that, for the last year and a half, I've joined up to co-present with a brain-based learning and development specialist. So we do a mental power seminar. So it's either 1 day or 2 day seminars.
Okay,
So we do some, it's very interesting about how the mind, we always think, okay, it all starts, your design starts with the brain. It's not whether you are from a certain culture, black or white, whatever, or your education. It's how are you wired. And once you understand that gives you the tools to then understand how you play to your strengths. So we start with a actual brain profile, so that each individual gets that, they understand themselves. If it's in a corporate setting, they understand within a team sense, who needs to do what. So it's very powerful. But more importantly, what I personally felt drew me to this is understanding physiologically what happens in the brain when you think or speak positive versus negative. The chemical reactions that happen there, how your energies change, all of that stuff. So it's very interesting, and like I say, we do that. We did one recently that was open to the public. We'll do some more. All that information is on my website, pennyheyns.com. And we also now starting to do a lot more in-house, because we find with the corporates especially, they need that team synergy going, and they need to be able to be open enough to discuss with each other, which in a public setting you won't necessarily do.
Maybe we'll hire you as well.
And then in addition, I do swim clinics. So I'm not a coach, so don't come and ask me to train your kid. But what I do is I focus on the mental side, the psychology of it, and the motivational aspect of it. And then also we look and identify and analyze stroke technique. So I use video footage of the greats like the Michael Phelps and others. We analyze that, put the kids in the water, practice that. So pretty much all my weekends are taken up with that. So
you have no time. So you're not resting at all.
It's fun.
I just want to go back to that point when you spoke about that hole. So how then did you get out of? So you were in that hole a year and a bit after winning double gold at Atlanta.
Yes.
And how then did you get out of the hole?
Well, with all my heart, I really wanted to quit swimming at that point, which wasn't the first time in my career. It was about the third time that I'd felt that way. And obviously each time you feel that way, coming off the back of disappointment. It's typical. And so...
Disappointment as in losing?
Yeah. Whether I had failures in swimming or just didn't perform as well as I wanted to, you always tend to think, well, this is good enough now, time to retire and move on. But in my case, feeling that I'm swimming for... someday I'm going to answer to the Lord. I always felt that it's not just my choice or what I feel like doing. I've got to be prayerful about it. And after really doing some soul searching and being prayerful, I felt at that point in time that I needed to move to Canada, where my coach was, to Calgary. Relocate, I didn't really want to. Nebraska gets down to minus 20 Celsius and Calgary is even colder. So I didn't want to go there. But I went, and like I say, once I got there, it wasn't immediate, but with, some soul searching again, I found that I needed to change my attitude. I realized at the end of the day, if I'm going to swim up and down the black line, I might as well have a good attitude, otherwise I'm wasting everyone's time. And as I did and started, there's a lot to be said for having a grateful or a thankful attitude for the opportunities you have and what you're doing. And so as I started really adopting that, and in my case, again, being quite prayerful and worshipful while I'm swimming, I just found that there's a desire that grew within me to swim again, and with that came the success. But it's not overnight, and it takes, diligence to keep on keeping on every single day, one day at a time. Don't look too far ahead. I know we're always told that we need to have these goals and these plans, and I talk about that in my corporate talks. It's important that we have those. But at the same time, if I were to dive into a pool and the whole way as I'm swimming, if I'm just thinking of the touch and the time, I'm not going to be focusing on the details and doing them well. And ultimately, the key to success is rather focus on the tiny details or the areas that you can control. Do that to the best of your ability. Don't worry about what others are doing. You can't control that. The only way they can affect you is if you let them do that, and that's only in the mind. So focus on that which you can control. Do it one step at a time. In terms of business, one client at a time. Whatever it may be, one person at a time.
Yeah, indeed. Good advice, and certainly advice that I think we can all relate to. Let's get to some of the other callers, to Judy in the Eastern Cape. Hi, Judy.
Hi.
Yes, hi.
Penny, do you know who it is? It's Judy Slade here.
Judy Slade?
Yes. We had some really good times together, especially overseas, remember?
Just remind us, Judy.
I recognize the name, but now.
Team manager.
Yeah, that's right.
Campaign.
That's right. Yes. How are you,
Yeah, well,
Mrs.
thank
Slade? Yes. How are you?
Mrs.
Oh, well,
Slade.
thanks.
you
It's
see.
so good to hear you.
Thanks.
My teams feel like children, and I watch you and Natalie and Rick and all those kids that we were together with so long ago.
Yes. Yes. So, what are you doing?
Retired, but really happy, thank you.
Oh,
And you
that's
sound like
great.
you're really focused in where you want to be, which is great.
Yes, I am. Thanks. No, I thought about you not so long ago.
Well, it's good to hear that you're doing so well, and you sound exactly the same as you used to when you were so much younger.
Thanks.
Indeed. Mrs. Slade, thank you so much for your call.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
You shared that,
Okay.
yeah.
Take
There,
care.
nice call. You remember that, yeah?
Yes. Yes.
There's some SMSs I'll read through a whole lot in one go. So one is, well, maybe you can answer this one. Is she married? Are you married?
No,
Yeah?
I'm not married.
Okay. You want to say anything about that?
Never felt that I needed to be married. I kind of grew up thinking I never thought I'd get married, and a few years ago I used to feel like I need to quantify that and say, well, maybe if God has the right guy someday, whatever. And then that got me into trouble. I had 4 dominees deciding that that I should marry them, and
Oh, my goodness, yes.
so now I think if I'm really just honest with myself and everyone, I never felt like I needed to be married. I've also never really had a desire to have kids. I always thought if I wanted, I'd rather adopt. I don't quite fancy the idea of giving birth, and I have a lot of respect for the ladies who do that. And so, yeah, I think even in, I guess I've even got scripture to back it up. Paul said if you don't feel you need to get married, it's better to be unmarried.
Okay, well, point made. Some more. You're very inspirational. The fact that you're so humble makes me want to listen to your message. It is somewhat comforting to know that we all face, some or same issues in life, okay? I thank her for being vocal about her relationship with the Lord. Wish other public figures would follow. That comes from LM saying, God bless you. Why did you retire early from swimming? And it seems like you've gone with luck as the other longer gold medalist for women. Not sure what that means, from Billy in Mahikeng. Penny, what are your thoughts about the disabled athletes? They get paid the same prize money as able-bodied athletes. Is this right? You have set a trend indeed. Proudly South African, Penny. You brought a sense of patriotism from Brian Kumalo. And there's some more. I'll read that in a second. Okay, maybe answer those in one go.
In one go.
If you can. You can pause.
Okay. Someone asked me the question, why did I retire so early? And actually, just 2 days ago, I spoke at Proudly Bidvest conference, and someone asked me the same question. And really, it's not that I retired so early. Back in those days, I was 26 when I retired, so that was quite late anyway in comparison to what swimmers were doing those days. I just think when I made the move to Calgary, I did so feeling in my heart that it was to continue until the Sydney Olympic Games, and then I would retire. So the choice to decide, or the decision to retire at Sydney or after Sydney, had nothing to do with my performances. And then obviously after you retire, you always think, well, was it the right decision? And I had closure on that in May of the following year, 2001. My mom passed away, and when she did, I realized that had I not retired from swimming, I would have gone back to Canada and been there and not had 5 months with my mom. And so in hindsight, I felt a peace about retiring. I know it was the right thing. I look today at what's happening in terms of breaststroke and the advances in the stroke, and I obviously think to myself, what would have happened if I had given it a little bit longer and tried these new things? But I think every athlete, no matter who they are, when they retire, at some point will have those same thoughts.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes.
And right, let me just say, I'm going to run through others, some of the obviously very just inspirational things. Someone asked about the prize money equal for disabled athletes versus the other athletes. Your thoughts on that?
I kind of feel like I'm happy for Natalie and the other Paralympians in terms of what they are earning. I kind of feel like no matter what I answer here, I'm going to get into hot water. All I can say is quote the
better
statistics.
Than the cold water that used to jump
yes.
the pool,
Let me just quote the statistics. And there are 10,500 athletes competing for 300 and something, like 305 medals, able-bodied. And there are 4,500 disabled athletes competing for 500 and something medals. So that's all I'm saying.
So the odds are greater than if you...
Yeah, I just think though, having said that, any kind of financial support that our athletes get go a long way to developing us or further developing us as professional athletes on the world stage. And certainly our Paralympians have always flown the flag high for South Africa. And in terms of being ambassadors for us, I think our strongest ambassadors have come from the likes of Natalie du Toit and Oscar Pistorius. So well done to all of those. And if that's a decision, if the country can afford to do that, then I think it's great.
Indeed. Right, another 5 more minutes with, it's amazing how time flies, with Penny Heyns, Olympic champion, and as some have suggested, the greatest we've ever had. How do you feel about that sort of statement when people say, like, the greatest?
Well, whether it is or isn't, it's going to change eventually anyway, right? I think, let me rather say, I just feel humbled by my career. And if you look at certain stats, then one can make a claim like that. However, we've got the likes of Chad right now, very exciting athlete to watch, immense talent. If for those who aren't really swim technicians, while Chad won his 200 butterfly race and did a great job in doing so, it was all heart, because in terms of technique, he's not quite as good as Michael, obviously. Michael is the expert, but Chad, what that says to me is that Chad's just got so much potential. And there's a lot of reason to expect that he's going to continue to improve a lot. And so certainly I think he can go to the next Olympic Games in Rio and come away with a couple more medals, certainly, and hopefully gold.
All right, out with swimming. So you have lunch with President Zuma. What would you put on the agenda?
Oh, man, I don't know.
So what do you want to get off your chest? I mean, that's really what I'm saying. What's troubling you?
In terms of the country and the politics?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, what I'm saying, you'll have lunch with the president, okay? So
I'd prefer to have lunch with Madiba.
Okay, but I mean, you don't have a choice in this matter, you see. That's my point.
Oh, okay. I think we've only got 2 minutes left.
You want to pass?
Move on, I'm passing.
All right, so who would you like to have lunch with? And not Madiba, because he's really very, very tied up now, right? I mean, anybody in the world, who's the one person, not just politician, anybody that you'd like to meet, and why? Are these like difficult questions?
Yeah, they're difficult because you know what? I don't actually think about it. I feel very blessed. I've met a lot of pretty cool people, but I've never really, I don't really pay attention to what's going on out there. So who would I want to have lunch with? I struggle to think. Who
wants to have lunch with Penny Heyns? Probably like,
you know what,
1,000 people picking up their hands now as I talk to you.
Yeah, it would probably be one or two, I'd say, Christian leaders, because I'd have a few questions. But
okay. I wonder what sort of questions you'd ask them.
No, just in general. I'd ask questions about the Bible and what do they think of certain scriptures. And
your biggest regret for you?
Biggest regret? Okay, when I say it's my biggest regret, I think it's the most significant one. It's not that I really ponder it and feel terrible. I just think, it would be that I was fortunate enough to fly down to Durban and spend the Tuesday morning with my mother, said goodbye to her, flew back to Joburg, thought that evening I should give her a call and say, I'm fine, I've arrived home safe, and, but I thought, you know what, I'll give her a call tomorrow. It's obvious I'm safe, otherwise she'd hear about it. Well, tomorrow never came. The next day the phone rang, my brother, told me that she'd passed away. So I guess my message, rather than regret, is just let's not leave anything until tomorrow.
Yeah, you always wonder about that last word. Hey?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, wow. What a book you'd recommend that we all read? Don't say you don't read either.
I do read.
Kip said that.
No, I do read. I'm just thinking, Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl. I think that's quite a good book. I'm kind of hesitant because a lot of books that I would recommend are probably going to lean towards the spiritual side. So,
well, if it is, it is. Yeah.
Is
there a quote that you'd like to share with us?
A quote?
Yeah.
I suppose I should have done my homework and seen, looked up what are these questions
you're going to ask me. This is more difficult than swimming, I promise you that. Maybe you should come out of retirement.
No, I just feel it. Okay, a quote. I just think basically, I read this recently. Wherever you are, be all there.
Be all there.
Be all there.
That means meaning what? Be
there in the
give
be
there
100%.
Yeah.
So if you're with your kids, be all there. Be 100% there with your kids. If you're with your spouse, be all there. If you're at work, be all there. Because I think very few of us are. I know for me personally that's a challenge. I'm in one place, but I'm busy thinking
Your
of the next
minds.
thing I'm supposed to do. Or you know, a lot of people, I recently spoke to someone who said, they spend time with their kid, but they feel so bad that they don't spend enough time. So I'm saying, so while you're with your kid, you're busy worrying about the fact that you don't spend enough time with your kid, and so the time's not quality. So
Indeed,
it's simple. Wherever you are, be all there.
All right. Two things. Lastly, unfinished business in your life in like 10 seconds.
I don't feel like there is. I feel like I'm on a good wicket right now.
You're fine. Okay.
Yes.
Not a sticky wicket, but a good wicket.
A
Indeed,
good
yeah.
wicket.
And how would you like to be remembered?
I think hopefully for the humility in my career and good sportsmanship, as opposed to the victories and successes. And I think ultimately as a person that was faithful in living up to what I believed was the call of my life, and at the same time hopefully touching other people's lives in a significant way.
Well, you certainly have touched our life, or our lives, no question about it. Penny Heyns, great that you're a part of us, and thanks for allowing us to put you in the spotlight. I certainly can remember, you'll be remembered for me, not just for winning, but those very, very insightful victory speeches that you gave. Very different to Chad's dad, that is, because yours was very spiritual and it came through, and I was certainly inspired by that.
Thanks
Time
a
now
lot.
for Radio VUCA. For Radio VUCA. For Radio VUCA. For Radio VUCA. For Radio VUCA.